First at 5. From the University of Florida's College of Journalism and Communications, you're watching WUFT News.
We're less than 100 days away from the presidential election, and the two leading candidates are working to shore up support in battleground states. This is WUFT's First at 5. I'm Natasha Holt. Vice President Harris has just weeks to choose a running mate, and her potential candidates are barnstorming the country on her behalf. And as Alice Barr reports, former President Trump pivots from campaigning against President Biden to the vice president, his likely opponent.
Inside of 100 days until the election, Vice President Kamala Harris announcing a $200 million fundraising haul in the first week of her presidential campaign as she narrows the field for her running mate, several of the leading contenders.
I would do what is in the best interest of the country.
Pitching their bipartisan outreach.
We have got to get back to a place where we are Americans first and Democrats and Republicans second.
And going on the attack against former President Trump.
He's afraid of having to defend a record that has been really dangerous and destructive.
As he sharpens his jabs against the vice president.
She's a radical left lunatic.
And his running mate, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, defends his 2021 comments referring to some Democrats, including Ms. Harris, as childless cat ladies.
It's not a criticism of people who don't have children. This is about criticizing the Democratic Party for becoming anti-family.
Former President Trump on defense over his Friday comments urging Christians to vote.
You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed, it'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians.
The Harris campaign accusing the former president of seeking the end of our elections if he wins, while the Trump team says he was talking about the importance of faith and uniting this country, all while President Biden is rolling out a proposed constitutional amendment to say former presidents don't have immunity for federal crimes, following a controversial Supreme Court ruling. Also proposing limiting Supreme Court justices to 18-year terms and holding them to binding ethics rules. In Washington, Alice Barr, NBC News.
After President Joe Biden announced he will not seek re-election, most Florida delegates to the upcoming Democratic National Convention quickly got on board with Vice President Kamala Harris. But some Democrats nationally feel Florida's not a focus in the 2024 presidential election. They say the campaign will focus on several other battleground states. Still, Florida Democratic leaders contend the state remains in play as races become more competitive. Florida House Minority Leader Fentrice Driscoll also is hoping to erase Republican supermajorities in the legislature.
Florida is not a red state. It has been a red performing state. But what we know is that when there are strong candidates at the top of the ticket, when people believe that elections are competitive, they do show out and they come out and vote.
Florida Republican leaders, including Governor Ron DeSantis, are confident Florida's 29 electoral votes will go to former President Donald Trump. Tomorrow, Marion County will test its voting machines ahead of the August 20th primary election. Election officials say the testing will begin at 3 tomorrow afternoon at the Marion County Election Center. Testing is done to make sure ballots are being counted and sorted correctly before each election. A canvassing board and members of the public watch as machines accept test ballots. Once confirmed that they work correctly, they'll be sealed until the election. Alachua County tested its equipment on July 23rd. The National Hurricane Center is tracking where a new tropical system may be forming in the next few days. Forecasters say this system has a 50% chance of development over the next 7 days. Closer to home, parts of north central Florida are dealing with some evening showers. Take a look at the UF weather radar where you can see storms popping up just south of Ocala. Let's get right over to UF forecaster Sienna Silvest tracking today's showers and what's brewing in the tropics.
That's right, there is movement in the tropics. This orange cone right here is that indication of what could be of possible impact if this disturbance does strengthen into a tropical depression or stronger. Now, the location of this disturbance is actually this yellow X right here. And as you can see, it is way off the coast and shows that it is too far out to see if it will have any clear impacts if possible. Now, this is a good reminder to stay prepped for this year's hurricane season. Assemble your supplies of food, water, and batteries for your household. Have a reliable transportation and evacuation route if needed. And stay informed. Look to officials for during, before, and after the storm. Now, coming up, we are expecting more rain, showers, and thunderstorms this week, as well as a continuation of those hot temperatures. So with those combined, we are expecting a more humid week. And more explanation coming up.
The Bradford County Sheriff's Office is on the scene of an unidentified body. It was found over the weekend in the woods just north of County Road 229 on County Road 225. The Sheriff's Office is asking residents to, if possible, avoid that area where they're actively investigating the case. If you have any information related to the investigation, please call the Bradford County Sheriff's Office. And gasoline prices in Florida increased slightly over the past week, with the average price of a gallon of regular unleaded Monday at $3.38 per gallon. According to the AAA Auto Club, that was 3 cents higher than a week earlier, but down a penny from a month ago. AAA spokesman Mark Jenkins says overall prices have been trending downward for some time.
I was looking at some of the numbers from recent years. Back in 2022, we were paying well above $4 a gallon at the pump.
Jenkins says prices could move lower in the coming weeks after a drop in crude oil prices last week. Nationally, the average price Monday for a gallon of regular unleaded was $3.51. Marion County Fire Rescue is asking for your help in providing local students with supplies for the upcoming school year. The bus Brigade Drive collects supplies such as pencils, notebooks, and folders to give to students. All Marion County Fire Rescue stations will serve as a drop-off point for any and all new school supplies. Coming up next, when WUFT's First at 5 returns, protecting minors from too much internet, how Congress is working to regulate screen time. And President Biden looking to overhaul the nation's highest court, why officials say his proposals will likely be dead on arrival. We'll be right back.
You're watching WUFT-TV News.
President Joe Biden is unveiling a proposal for major changes at the U.S. Supreme Court, among them term limits for SCOTUS justices. According to the White House officials, this makes him the first sitting president in generations to back wide-scale changes to the way the nation's highest court operates. Earlier today, President Biden debuted the proposal, which calls for a constitutional amendment to strip the president of immunity for crimes committed while in office, term limits, and a binding code of conduct for the high court. The president's proposed reform stands little chance of going anywhere with a divided Congress, but officials say it serves as an election year message designed to excite the Democrats' progressive base.
What we've seen over these past years are ethical lapses that would never be tolerated in any other branch of government. We need a strong binding code of ethics for the United States Supreme Court.
The proposal already has drawn sharp pushback from Republicans. House Speaker Mike Johnson said it would go nowhere in the House, assuming Republicans retain control of the chamber next year. A new study is shedding light on how too much internet usage can impact teenagers' brain. Neuroimaging shows it can actually disrupt pathways linked to attention span and memory. And as Brian Abel reports, the Senate is taking steps forward on a pair of separate bills to protect kids and teens online.
Teens diagnosed with internet addiction often struggle with muddled attention spans. A new study in the journal PLOS Mental Health could explain why. Neuroimaging uncovered disrupted signals between brain regions that are important for controlling attention and working memory.
The White House also is stepping up its efforts this week at a task force recommended parents keep open communication with children about social media, set expectations for what kids can watch, how long they can use devices, and make sure they have the correct privacy settings. Most renters feel like home ownership isn't in the cards for them. According to a new CNN poll, 86% of current renters say they'd like to buy a home but can't afford one. Among those, 54% think they'll never be able to afford a home. The housing market is facing an affordability crisis because of surging home prices and high mortgage rates. When it comes to age, younger Americans are more hopeful of the situation will change. The poll found 53% of adults younger than 45 who want to buy a home believe it's likely it will eventually happen. That's compared to just 32% of people older than 45. As wildfires continue to burn in states like California, a new study suggests long-term exposure to wildfire smoke can have serious long-term effects on the brain. The researchers looked at 10 years of data from more than 1 million people in Southern California who were 60 years or older. They found the odds of a dementia diagnosis increased after repeated exposure to wildfire smoke. In California, the frequency of extreme fire days has doubled since the 80s. While wildfire smoke seems to carry the highest risk to the brain, pollution from motor vehicles and factories also appears to play a role. The study authors say people can protect themselves from air pollution including wildfire smoke, by staying indoors. If you have to go out in a smoky area, you should wear an N95 or KN95 mask. Before we go, let's have one more look at the weather.
That's right. So weather this week is going to be in the low to mid 90s with those rain chances at 60%. So for the end of July, expect humidity.
Thanks for joining us. We're back here tomorrow for another edition of First at 5. But your North Central Florida news is always on at WUFT.org and all of our social media platforms. Have a wonderful night.